Subtle skills, big results.
Welcome to the Ninja Selling Podcast.
Welcome back to the Ninja Selling Podcast. Matt is back with me, and also we have a special guest, Larry Kendall, back with us again. So we're super excited to go down another journey around Ninja. To all of you joining us today, thank you so much for taking time out of your day. If you're new to the podcast, go check out Larry Kendall's book. Go check out the actual Ninja Selling website. You can learn everything about what we talk about on there. And if you're interested in taking a deeper dive, you can jump into coaching, but you can also just jump into our Facebook group, which is the Ninja Selling Podcast community. Amazing, like-minded individuals. We are rounding up. We are thinking 14,000. It might be 100,000. It's somewhere in there where we think that number sits right now. But an amazing group of people. And let's jump right into today. We were getting ready for this. We were kind of talking about the power of the industry and where it's at right now and where it's going. And we started talking about the one of three things will happen today. And in the seller's process, the Sweet 16 seller's process that we've been using for a long time, there's a piece in there called the one of three things. And it sets the stage for while you're working with your seller in knowing the path that this is going to take as we're starting our working relationship. And there's been people over the years that have said, why don't we have this as part of the buyer's process? And out of necessity and the world that we're currently in, we all at Ninja were like, this needs to be added in now. This needs to come in. And we're going to talk about what those one of three steps looks like, how you fit it into your process with working with buyers, and whether you're a full-blown ninja using the 10-step buyer's process, or whether you just want to implement this into your working relationship with your clients, you can do that. And Larry, good morning. Welcome back. And Matt, good morning to you, sir.
Morning.
Well, thanks, Garrett. Thanks, Matt. It's an honor to be with you guys.
Always a pleasure, Larry.
It is always a pleasure. Well, let's jump into this idea of these, one of three things are going to happen today, because it's been part of the seller's process for a long time. And Larry, do you want to give us a little insight onto, in the seller side, what are the one of three steps, just so we can kind of set the groundwork around this?
You bet. In the seller's process, there's a stage there where you ask the seller if they have any questions, and you make a list of the questions. Typically, they'll say, well, we need to agree on price, or maybe we need to agree on the fee, or I need to know what we need to do to get the house ready. But you make a list of those, and then you summarize and say, after we've answered your questions on price and on fee and what you have to do to get the home ready, one of three things will happen. One is you may like what I have to say, and we have an agreement here, and you decide to hire me to sell your home. The second thing that could happen is, for whatever reason, maybe you don't feel that I'm the right fit, or maybe you're interviewing other brokers, and you may decide not to hire me. And the third thing that could happen is, if I don't feel I can get you where you want to go on time and meet your objectives, I have a responsibility to tell you that. It would not be fair to you for me to take your listing knowing down deep inside that it's mission impossible, that I really can't get the job done. And if I feel that's the case, I have an obligation to say that to you. Are you okay with that? What we find is many times the seller will say, well, wow, I really appreciate that level of honesty. Wow, I appreciate knowing that I don't feel being pressured to have to work with you, that I have an out here if I want to. And as the broker, I have an out as well. And typically what will happen about half the time when you say, if I don't feel I can get the job done for you, I have a responsibility to tell you that. I won't take your listing if I don't feel I can meet your goals. About half the time, the seller will say, now, wait a minute, we want to work with you. And it's a little bit of a takeaway close. It's not intended to be that way. It's just intended to be, here's what could happen. And one of three things will happen. And it's clarifying for them. And they appreciate it. So we've always had great feedback from our sellers on the one of three things can happen.
I know for using it myself in real estate, for me, I always felt like it was setting a very healthy working relationship with my client, where it wasn't they're going like, oh, this guy we'll dangle this in front of him and he's going to want our business no matter what. We'll make him kind of like fight for it a little bit. And on the other side of it, the realtors who go in that just say, at all costs, I got to get this listing. I mean, we kind of set the stage ourselves as in the industry a little bit. And all of a sudden, it just completely diffuses that entire situation. And it makes us have this very even playing field where it allows us to take the next steps of we're working together here. I'm here to help you get to where you want to go. I have value, obviously we're going to get you there. And I think it's just incredibly healthy. That's what I've always taken away from it.
Yeah, it is incredible how it works that way. And now it's needed in the buyer process for many reasons, one of which being the environment we're in, which in episode 1 or 2 ago, we just talked about, one of those major situations that's in. But for this to fit into the buyer process, there also needs to be a better use of the clarification of value, which is something that a lot of realtors have not been paying attention to in their buyer processes. We spoke before, Larry, you said act 1, that, spending time up front is not something that's often done. But even if it is done or some variation of it, a lot of times buyer's agents aren't going deep on their 5 points of value. So before we get into the how we display the one of 3 things, where does that come in? Maybe you could share with us how do we set up this value clarification question, as you call it?
You bet.
Yeah, because if the value is not established, the one of 3 things doesn't mean a darn thing, because you get the last one and they're like, okay. Like,
oh, yeah. Like, oh, well, yeah, sure. You can do that if you want.
By definition with a seller, because a seller has to hire you through the signing of a listing agreement, we end up having a seller consultation. With buyers, it depends on the state that you're in. Some states require an agreement be signed. Many states don't. A lot of agents who work with buyers don't take the time for that buyer interview. And we think it's very, very important. They just jump in the car and start showing houses. We believe that properly working with the buyer is a 3-act play or 3-step process. Act 1 is the buyer interview. Act 2 is then showing property. And Act 3 is the soft closing, writing the contract and moving to closing. And many realtors just skip Act 1. And they've been able to do that over the years because they're going to get paid. They don't have to present a value proposition. They just look in the MLS. Oh, there's a commission for me. Let's go look at houses. And now with the lawsuit, with the impending changes in the MLS, there may be 0 showing up as the cooperating commission, in which case then you're going to have to find a way to articulate your value to a buyer and get paid. And so I think now Act 1 becomes critical for you. And so let's jump into Act 1 is a 10-step process. We recommend that you start with step 4, which is where you have prepared for them a buyer packet. And you're just showing them what's in the buyer packet. And one of the things that's in there is the real estate contract. And you mentioned to them that when we find the home, this is the contract that we'll be using. You want to get their eyes on the contract up front so they have a chance to see it rather than pulling it out once we find the house. So you're kind of peeling through documents. You have the contract. And if you're doing a buyer agency agreement, this is a great time because you've got the packet. You're just peeling through the documents. It's a time for you to go through your buyer agency agreement. If you're in a state that doesn't have that agreement, then what you do is now in step 4 is where you articulate your value. And this gets back, Matt, to your question earlier about the value clarification question.
And Larry, I wanted to just take a moment to highlight the importance of showing the contract during this process, because so many agents will pause and say, well, the contract's long. I don't really want to overwhelm them. And it's like, well, but don't you not want to overwhelm them when it comes time to write a offer for the biggest purchase of their life? Wouldn't it make sense to have that discussion up front? So I just want to highlight the importance of sharing that contract during that process.
I think it's critical. And you may be in a state where you don't have a contract. Maybe attorneys prepare the contracts. If you are in a state that has a real estate commission approved contract, mention that it's a real estate commission approved contract. Yes. This is the contract that all of us in Colorado are required to use. It's prepared by the real estate commission. That reassures them that that contract is consumer friendly and that it's not something that you and your office cooked up that's one-sided. And so it's very consumer friendly.
That's a really important message, Larry, you just said, because I think that the consumers don't do this enough. They don't buy and sell real estate enough. And as far as they're concerned, they have no idea that the real estate commission is the one that oversees that form and makes sure that it is done in the right way to protect the consumer, to protect what's going on here. And it's very easy from the consumer side, not doing this enough, to think that that is just your office contract that they use, and who knows what's in there. Which then you get into the client that says, well, I want to read every single ounce of this because I want to make sure you guys aren't sneaking anything in there. It's like, This is not our form that we just made up. I think it's really important.
Yeah. It's a critical step, really. And it sets the stage so that later when they find the home, this isn't a big surprise to them that we pull out the 21-page contract. And they've had a chance to have that. If they're a perfection person, they probably have read every word of it. But at least they have it. I think it's very important, and especially to mention that if you have a standard real estate commission approved contract, mention that.
Yeah.
It reassures them. So it's in this step 4, you're going through these documents in the buyer packet. And at this point, it's time to articulate how this process is going to work and your value. So you would say something like this. Do you believe that homes sell for a fixed price, or do you believe there's a range of value based on the knowledge and negotiating skills of your realtor? Most buyers say, well, and I hadn't probably thought about that, but I suppose there is a range, and I suppose that you could help me maybe negotiate a better contract or something. I hadn't thought about that, but I guess so. So that's the value of asking that question. And you say, well, my job is to help you get the home you want at the price and terms that are best for your situation. There's 5 ways I do this. And this is where you start to articulate not only the process, but also your value. Number 1, I'm going to ask you a series of questions that'll help you find the right home. And if you're willing to invest an hour up front with me, it will save you days or even weeks on the back end. And more importantly, we're more likely to get the home you want. So that's number 1. Number 2, I'll help you craft an offer strategy that allows you to be comfortable purchasing the home you want at the best possible price and terms. Number 3, my job is to find a way to expose you to the market, expose the market to you, and make sure that we look at everything that's available. We'll look at everything in the MLS. We'll look at off-market properties. We'll look at bank-owned properties, for sale by owner properties. My goal is to make sure that you don't miss out on anything. Number 4 is to help you negotiate the best contract. Did you know there's 5 negotiating points to a contract and only one of them is price? Price is important, and we'll look at price. But also, let's look at terms. Let's look at the dates. Can we make the dates match up with your schedule? Inclusions and exclusions, and then finally, and very importantly, contingencies. And so we will negotiate all 5 of these on your behalf to try to help you get the best contract on the best terms for you. And then number 5 is there's a lot of moving parts in a real estate transaction. I've seen different studies, anywhere from 80 to over 200 different moving parts. My job is to manage those parts for you and help you get to where you want to go on time, and make sure your contract closes. As many as 20 to 25% of the contracts cancel or don't close, they fall out. And that can be heartbreaking if you've gone through that whole process and at the last minute, something isn't quite right and it falls apart. So my job is to help you find a great home and negotiate that. Make sure you don't miss anything. Make sure you don't pay too much for it, and help you negotiate the price and terms. Now, let's talk about how I'm compensated. There's one of 3 things can happen. Number 1, I may be compensated by the seller. There are sellers that have decided that it's in their best interest to cooperate and offer a cooperating broker's fee, in which case I'll be paid by the seller. The second thing that could happen is if I'm not compensated by the seller, then in our agreement here, I'm going to be asked to be compensated by you. And there are several things that we could do on that. I could call the listing realtor and see if we can obtain compensation from the seller, or if we can even increase the price of the home slightly to be compensated. That would be an option. Another option for you is that you can compensate me directly, either through cash, through some other form of payment, even a credit card or even a note. But we'll talk about that, which way, would work for you. I realize you're short on cash because of the down payment. So we've got to find a way to work together. The third thing that could happen is if there's no way that the seller will compensate me and there's no way that you're able to compensate me, then I'll release you from this agreement and you'll be basically on your own. You can negotiate on your own behalf in that particular situation. I'm not going to hold you to an agreement that isn't in your best interest that you can't fulfill. I would also say, and I just as a side point here, depending on the rules in your state, in Colorado, we're not allowed to be selling property and preparing contracts unless we've been engaged to do that and we're being compensated to do that. So this idea of, well, would you do it for free? Could you just prepare the contracts for us? I may really want to do that to help you, but that's problematic in our state. In Colorado, it's required that for you to prepare legal documents, you have to be involved in the transaction. You have to be hired to do that, and you have to be compensated to do that. So those are the three things that could happen. And do you have any questions on that, or are you okay with that?
Well, Larry, what's really interesting about going through this process? So, for one, I think, this conversation came up for the three of us earlier because you in the state of Colorado are starting to see some properties being offered that hold 0% to the buying agent. So whether it's coming up in your area or not yet, this is happening in some areas where you might be showing a property to your clients and realize that there is no fee attached for you. So that's why we wanted to have this conversation today. I think the other thing that's really interesting around this is that there's elements of like the Sweet 16 listing presentation and the buyer presentation where sometimes the real estate agent will say, why in the world would I ever say that? Like if I give them that option, and they know they don't have to use me, or they know that they could go and buy a for sale by, or maybe sell their home for sale by owner. Like, why would I ever bring these things up? And I think it's really interesting that if you've done a really good job of showing your value, understanding all the moving parts, going through, as Matt, as you said, going through the entire contract with them, or at least showing it to them where they have to understand this is what we're going to be going through to help you get your home. Like all of a sudden that third step isn't an option anymore. And Larry, you've mentioned this too, that when you get to that third step and you say, hey, I will release you, or I may choose not to work with you if we can't get this to come together. More often than not, they're like, wait. Hold on. Like, let's not go extreme here. Like, we want to use you. I find that more often than not, don't you?
Absolutely. And especially if you've articulated what you're going to do for them and you've demonstrated your value to them, then when that comes up. So I wouldn't do the one of three things can happen at the beginning. I would do it at the end after you've said, here's the process. Here's what we're going to do. Here's how I can bring value to you and to this transaction. Now, one of three things will happen. At that point, in every single case, in my experience, they'll say, no, wait a minute. Whatever it takes, we want to work with you. We don't want to go it alone. We want to work with a professional. Yeah, we have these situations right now where we're starting to see 0% for the cooperating broker. But you know what? Throughout time, we've had for sale by owners. And I've sold a lot of for sale by owners over the years. And in every case, I call the for sale by owner and I say, would you be willing to pay me a fee if I have a buyer for your house? We've always been able to work it out. But in my buyer interview in step 4 and step 5 of the buyer process, I just say to the buyer, look, if you find a for sale by owner and you want to buy that for sale by owner, I believe that I can help you. But if I can't, I'll release you and you can work with them on your own by yourself. And they always say, oh, wait a minute. We don't want to be on our own and by ourselves. We want to be with you. We want to be, we trust you. We need your help.
Well, I think it's important in showing, like, we talk about the need power dynamic in negotiations. And while I don't like to look at this as a negotiation because we're trying to find an agreement to work together on the same team, a lot of realtors can get commission breath and in a way of like, oh, I need this deal. I need this person. So why would I do step 3? It's just 1 or 2, right? Either the seller pays me or you pay me. There's no third option. It's like, I'm getting paid. And when you release that, when you take that away, one, I think it showcases for yourself that you believe in your own value. It shows, hey, I believe in the value that I'm bringing, so much so that I know you'll achieve results working with me. And if you can't, that's totally okay. So you shift that, the power in your favor in that. And I think that's why you always get people saying, no, I really want to work with you, because the value truly is there. This isn't some type of tactic or, script to get buyers to say, ooh, yes, I will work with you. It is a process that actually builds belief in value, which thus really showcases there is value.
Well, Larry, you've mentioned for years, and I got it from you, is working on from the same side of the table. And a lot of times when we can't develop this working relationship, it turns into us against them, against the process out here, the searching for a home or selling a home. And what happens all of a sudden when you put it into this perspective, you bring them over to your side of the table. And now it's you and them working together with this, challenge that's been put out in front of us of either finding a home or selling a home. And the minute you, Matt, as you were saying, take that out of the equation, all of a sudden it's a much healthier working relationship.
It totally is. And the key to it, again, I can't emphasize this enough, is you have to have an act one. You have to have the buyer interview. The days of just let's jump in the car and go look at some houses, that's fine, but you may not be compensated for that, depending upon what's going on in your market. One other, I think this shouldn't be a big challenge, but it will be a big challenge for some realtors, is that to really make this work, you're going to have to pick up the phone and call the listing realtor. Just like I had to pick up the phone and call that for sale by owner, or you pick up the phone and call the listing realtor and say, I have a buyer. I see you have zero compensation here in the MLS. Let's talk that through. Is there any way that there could be some compensation? Has the seller maybe rethought about that? You can talk it through, but you have to pick up the phone, and then you have to pray that the listing realtor will pick up the phone and answer it.
Isn't that crazy? I'm sorry. Oh my goodness.
I mean, all of this points towards improving the way we do business, right?
Yes.
I mean, and Ninjas have been doing business this way ever since they discovered Ninja.
Yeah.
Let's hope.
Yeah.
Right? And I guess in that way, if they're not doing it, then they're Ninos, right? Ninja's a name only.
I think the Ninjas are going to do just fine with the changes because they're doing act one.
Yeah.
With the buyers.
Yeah.
The realtors who don't have an act one, don't have a buyer consultation, they're a glorified taxi driver, and they're just showing houses. They're going to struggle with the changes that are coming, but I think the Ninjas are going to do just fine.
Larry, one thing that I wrote notes down here as you were talking, and just kind of a thing that came to me is that, so one is so with the 3 steps, obviously we have to, act one has to happen first. And I think with a lot of things in Ninja, as you start to realize that there's a process, things have to happen in order. And one of the things is that there's going to be a lot of people that are listening to this episode right now. They're going to come across this, but they're going to come across it too late. They're all of a sudden showing property. They're realizing that one of these doesn't have compensation for them. And they're going to be like, oh yeah, that's right. That thing I listened to in the podcast. One of 3 things are going to happen. Well, you can't do that as you're going out to look at the house that's not offering the commission. Oh, let me just guys know 3 things are going to happen here. We're either going to figure this out, or I'm going to all of a sudden leave you high and dry and walk. And you're left to figure this out now on your own, now that you found a house that you loved. And you can't do it too early, because you haven't given your value, and you show up and you say 1 of 3 things are going to happen. Should we now move forward and see what's going to take place here? Because they're going, what in the world are you even talking about? Well, I don't even understand what you mean to me. It really has to happen at that right point before you get to the situation. Like, this is that conversation that needs to take place if it does show up down the road. So all of a sudden you can say, this is one of those homes that I discussed and we talked about when we were in our initial meeting, when we first met and we're going through the process here. If you don't set that stage right, you can't come back and have the conversation later, because now you look really salesy having that conversation when there's that one property in hand and now you're holding it hostage over here's how we're going to make this work together. So it really has to happen at the right times.
Yeah, you got to do it in the right order.
Yeah.
For sure. Yeah.
Yeah. So for anybody listening, if this isn't part of your process, start adding it in. And if you don't know the full 10 steps, grab a copy of Larry's book, Ninja Selling, and read it. All the 10 steps are in there. We're now inserting this, one of three things there on the buyer side. And if you want to learn that, you can go to an installation, of course, and learn it fully, or join in coaching, and we can handle that. But don't wait. And also, if you are already going through the process with buyers, like, hey, I already got 5 buyers, what do I do now? There could be an opportunity for a reset conversation. If perhaps one of these buyers has been kind of hanging out there for a long time, you might need a reset conversation as well. And I think on the other side, just focus on your new ones that come through. Get the process going with your new ones that are coming through. And that way you're prepared, because maybe you're in a marketplace where you haven't seen the zero compensation. But I think we all agree that as we're already seeing it, but over the next few years, you're definitely going to have sellers that are going to say, hey, I don't have to offer this. It's like a cycle.
Oh my gosh, they can now do it. They've been able to do it. Like, this is not new.
I guess they've always could have offered $1,
Yeah.
right? I mean, that was always an option.
Yeah, and we've all been around long enough that we've dealt with for sale by owners. That's an example. We've dealt with builders. There's been times when builders would not cooperate.
Just a few years ago, during the high market, you had some builders offering as low as $500, $1,000 compensation.
Yep. Right. So again, you need to have that conversation with your buyer at the beginning in Act 1.
Yeah, no doubt. Well, this is great. This is a really great nugget for people to consume, put into your buyer process. Larry, thank you so much for walking us through this, particularly also those 5 points of value. I think that alone is a really great piece for people to think about. If you're not explaining things in those ways, hit rewind, or I guess drag the little thing back, because there's no rewind button really anymore. Just drag it back, listen to it again, listen to it over and over again. I think this is an episode you can put a star on and come back and say, hey, wait, how did Larry say that? Because Larry, you always have such an incredible way of delivering this that sounds really, really great, sounds calm and confident. So
he's practiced. By the way, he practices. It's not just a thing that he.
Well, thanks, guys. It's always an honor to be on your show, and you do such a great job for so many of the ninjas, and the podcast has become an online community with the Facebook group, and so keep up the great work. I just appreciate you.
Thank you, Larry.
Well, thank you, Larry. We appreciate that. Speaking of the Facebook group, if you want to hop in there, head over to Facebook and search for the Ninja Selling Podcast. You'll find it there. And if you want to learn more about ninja selling, the trainings, the coaching, and all that, head over to ninjaselling.com. You'll find us there. So, Garrett, Larry, thank you guys so much. Everybody listening, thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
If you enjoyed today's episode and would like more, visit us at theninjasellingpodcast.com.
There you will also find links for more information about ninja selling and coaching. Have an incredible day.